All right, hello, Andy Lockwood here, and what I wanted to do right now is actually run you through my slide deck that I want to share with you in order for you to give your presentation and get some clients. So what I decided to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through my slide deck with you, but I'm going to be along the way making a lot of comments. So this is not the actual presentation that I give to prospective clients, because I'm going to be giving all sorts of side notes to you behind the scenes, so to speak, or looking over my shoulder. So I'm going to be kind of going in and out of character, I guess, so to speak. And if it makes sense, I will go through the presentation live later as if you are a prospective client, but I'm not going to do that here. I'm going to do a combination. All right. So what I'm going to attempt to do is, this is always interesting with Google Hangouts, I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me. This is my favorite Doctor Who effect. And I'm going to go over to my, well, actually, so I'm in the portal. This is, I don't know how I can show you where I'm in the portal here. So if you were, and it may be, since I'm constantly updating stuff, depending on when you look at this training, you'll see here all the modules. Then you're going to go into bonus, and I have the 12-6 slide deck. So I don't know if that's going to be on top when you see this, but that will be a PDF. It's not editable, unfortunately, because I wanted to preserve the format of it. If we can figure out a way to give you an editable version, maybe I can do that in Google Docs or something, we will do that. So let me get right into it. So I start the presentation. I like to ask a lot of questions first when I'm doing these live. I like to start off by making it interactive, and I also like to give away stuff. So you can give away, one of the things I've given away lately is a Roku streaming device. So I'll say, okay, so at the end, I'm going to give you a quiz, and whoever gets the answer right gets a prize. So what I do at my presentations that are live is a little bit different than give away a Roku. I usually do that on webinars, but live I will give away a copy of my book. And I actually think that writing a book is a great thing. You may not feel like you're up for it right now. It's a lot easier than you think. That will be the topic of another module or another lesson, I guess. But I start out by asking questions like, okay, so who here has a senior in high school, class of 2017, whatever. Who here has someone younger? Just show me signing, raise some hands, that type of thing. And then I'll say, okay, well, that's good, because I see a smattering of answers here. There's people at all different points of the spectrum, the college planning spectrum and the timeline. And the reason I ask that is because people ask me a lot, what's the best time to get serious about planning for college? And I'll say, well, conception is the ideal time, and the second best time is now. But my flippant answer is probably not what you're looking for. My real answer is I tell people second half of sophomore year, junior year is good. That's really, to me, that's ideal. A lot of it depends on when you are ready, when the kid is ready. But I think if you're in that time frame, that's the best. If you're a little bit later, that's okay too, because the college financial aid process happens every year. It's recurring. It's like that movie Groundhog Day, which is, where Bill Murray has that awful day over and over. And you'll pick up stuff that that you can use. It's just that the later you let this slide, the fewer options you have. The earlier you start, the more options you preserve for yourself. So stepping out of character for a second, of course, the reason I am saying that is because I want to encourage people not to procrastinate. That's probably the biggest thing you have to sell against, so to speak, in this presentation, is just the overwhelm and the procrastination. Not so much who else is doing these types of presentations, other college planners. You will, of course, have competition, but your main competition is really against the procrastination, sort of behavior of human beings in general. And, on top of that, there's also the theory or the belief that you really can't do anything because you're not going to qualify. So those are really two things I want to hammer throughout, and I'll try to pick up on those as we go along. I'll just point out, why I'm saying certain things. So back in character. So this is the 12 deadly college planning mistakes and how to avoid them so you can get a 45% discount off the cost of college. Here's what we're going to cover today: how to get 45% off, even if you think, no way can we possibly qualify for anything, which types of savings accounts hurt you and which actually help you so that you can triple your eligibility for financial aid. So by the way, as an advisor, you, of course, want them to learn that. That's why I'm hammering that right up front here, because you want to introduce that in the beginning and just sort of seed that for later in the presentation when you tell them, hey, I'm the guy who can help you improve your eligibility. And how to negotiate with the college. That's one of the most popular things that I have found that people are very interested in based on feedback. I always survey people afterward. This is a credibility slide, and I'm guessing you won't have much of this stuff. If you do, use it. It's great. Whatever your story is, it's important to tell it here, I think, or in the beginning somewhere, because they want to know why they should listen to you. So sometimes I say, listen, these are the books I've written. I do a lot of presentations. I've been in the media and all that. But the real reason that I got into this field, it's almost like it chose me, because I myself had a really bad experience with college debt. And my dad was self-employed. He was a freelance photographer. He made, there were some years where he made less than $20,000. I remember him going through all the financial aid paperwork when I went to the fourth most expensive college in the country, and it was a mess. And I know we got some aid, but I know we could have gotten a whole lot more. And I had all these loans, and the only conversation I ever had about this stuff with him back then, because I didn't really focus on this, was, what about all these loans? And his response between undergrad and then when I asked him again in law school was, don't worry about it. It'll all work itself out. Well, it didn't really work itself out, because I had 6 figures of loans and all sorts of credit issues and denials of mortgages and all that. And now I have my own family, and my wife and I, Pearl there, she's my partner, we've sworn to each other that our kids will never go anything remotely similar to what I went through. So just to pause here, to step out of character, whatever your story is, maybe you had debt, maybe your kids went through the process, maybe you know someone in the family, it's important to sort of humanize yourself and align yourself with your audience in the best way that you possibly can. So be creative, but don't make it a stretch. Then I get right into the problem. So the formula for this presentation is problem, agitate, and solve. So there's $1.3 trillion in debt, and defaults are on the rise, and more than 13% of families have between $50,000 to $100,000 in debt. 750,000 almost households with seniors still have student loans. Private student loans are over $165 billion, according to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and defaults, I mentioned before, are on the rise. You'll note here, by the way, that I have all these authorities cited here, because now they are paying attention. It's not just coming from me. That's credentializing. That's very important for your credibility as a speaker. Other trends that are very disturbing: only 39% of kids graduate in 4 years. I will explain that a little bit later, why that is. Almost half of college grads are working in jobs that don't even require a college degree, even 2 years after they graduate. So the landscape is pretty bleak. So let's get right into the mistakes. Let's get right into mistakes that you can avoid so that you will maximize your eligibility for financial aid, and you'll be able to send your kids to the school that they deserve, instead of having to say, I'm sorry, I just can't afford it. So I say stuff like that throughout, because it's very important to tie it all in. You don't want to just teach, statistic. You want to also tie it back to the reason why they're here. And that's an emotional reason. When you say stuff like, so you can afford the college that your child deserves to go, instead of having to look her in the eye and say, I didn't do my part, I'm sorry, that brings it home. So it snaps them out of this left brain stat, and into the right brain emotional, I feel it. I feel the reason. So this is the first mistake: failure to understand the financial aid formulas. And if you don't understand, that's okay, because look, this is the simplified view of the financial aid system, courtesy of the Department of Education. This is the best slide. This almost just sells itself. It tells the message here is, this is complicated. You can't do this yourself. So I pretty much always include that slide no matter what. Guidance counselors, a lot of times families or parents will say, well, can't my guidance counselor help me? And the reason they can't is just inherently in the system, they are outnumbered. Nationally, the ratio of guidance counselors to kids is one counselor for every 500 kids. And even if your ratios tend to be lower at your school, still, this is a very complicated, complex system that you shouldn't really expect your guidance counselor to understand, because it's real specialty. I personally have devoted hours and hours and years of study to this, and I stay current on all the changes. And it's a lot for me to keep up with. And that's probably why your accountant is not the right person to speak to also, because they're too busy, keeping abreast of the IRS regulations, which are quite a mountain. And on top of that, have you ever tried to get your accountant during tax season? It's near impossible. What about your financial guy? Here's the deal with financial guys. A lot of them are well-intentioned, but again, they just aren't trained in this area. So, if you, assuming you are a financial person, that's why you're investing in this course, you should say, I've invested my time and my dollars to become a certified advisor for the College Solution Center. So I know how hard it is to learn this stuff. And to be quite candid, a lot of financial people get into this business in order to just push product. And I personally think that that's a dangerous proposition, because many advisors will inadvertently, best case scenario, push an unsuitable product. And that's just not what it's all about. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. So this is the actual financial aid formula. It's cost of attendance minus EFC, estimated family contribution, equals your need. And I like doing this right up front, because this gives them meat and substance right away. And if you spend, sometimes I have a tendency to spend too much time on the preamble and all that. And I've tried to cut that back, because I've noticed people itching live. And when I do these things online, I see the chat like, when are we going to get to it? So I like to start right in the beginning with this, and then I go ahead and explain it. I spent a lot of time explaining what cost of attendance means, which is tuition plus all the other stuff, room and board, travel fees and all that. And then I'll ask people, who here knows how much 1 year of college costs? And then people just yell out numbers. Sometimes people say, well, it depends where you go, or something like that. And then I'll say, yeah, of course it does. So what about a private college? How much does that cost? And I'll get some numbers, and I'll tell them what the right answer is. I'll say, what about a state school when you're a resident? How much is the cost of attendance there? And a lot of times people know, sometimes they don't know. So it's good to just, again, to get them involved. You always want to check back with them and ask them these types of questions. So I go through this, and of course, there's more training on this in another lesson. And then we get right into EFC, because again, I'm seeding the fact that you can lower your EFC. So here's what it's all about. You'll qualify for more need. You'll show more need. And that means you will have more eligibility for grants and scholarships and other financial aid. It's actually a little bit different. You calculate EFC differently for the FAFSA and the profile. By the way, I like using little images like this, because it shows you that this is an example, of course, of a Rubik's Cube, which is complicated to solve. So that's a not so subtle type of tie-in there. And again, I want to keep hammering this. You can lower your EFC legally and ethically, and that's what I'm going to show you how to do this. So let's look at some numbers. Let's say the cost is $60,000. EFC is 40. You're showing need of $20,000. But does that mean you will get all $20,000? No, because the percentage of financial need met varies by school. And I'll explain a little bit later how to look that up. Again, I'm always talking about, here's what's going to happen next. It's like a cliffhanger, and an old serial radio show, which I think all of us probably are too young to have actually witnessed live. But stay tuned, and our next episode we'll talk about blah blah blah. You always want to lead them on that way. That's very important, because that arouses curiosity. That's a big trigger, and you want to keep them active and engaged. I know I keep saying the same thing, but that's important. So one question you should always research is, what percentage of need do you meet? So let's say that this particular school meets 100% of need. And that's not far-fetched, because roughly 62 colleges meet 100% of need. So if that's the situation, they will cover that entire $20,000, and you will only pay your EFC of $40,000 for college that costs $60,000. So that's not a bad discount. It's a 33% discount. A lot of private schools will meet 90% of need, or a little bit less, which means that they will meet 90% of that $20,000 or $18,000. So you will pay your EFC $40,000 plus your unmet need. 40 plus 2 is 42. So you'll pay $42,000. That's still not bad. And I know that I'm going quickly, but I have a lot of material to get through. So just bear with me. I will pause for questions. And that's important to say also, because people are going to be, what, you know, it's okay if they don't get everything. You're telling them everything, but the faster you go, you know, you won't be going that fast in the beginning, but just bear in mind, even if you go too fast, that's fine, because it just separates, it widens the chasm between your knowledge and their knowledge. So there are 4 questions I think you should research long before you finalize your college list. What percentage of need do you meet? That's a typo there. So what percentage of need do you meet, not do you meet? How is that need met? Meaning, when you get a $20,000 award, what percentage is free and what percentage is not free? Loans and self-help. What are graduation rates? How long does it take to get out of school? Because that varies. In fact, the average graduation rate I told you before is 39%. It takes a lot longer to get out of public school than it does for state school. Guess why? Who knows why? Then I'll pause for questions. And people say, oh, it's because kids are partying too much, or because the colleges want you to stay there longer, or, you know, and once in a while, not once in a while, maybe once every other workshop, someone will give the right answer, which is because you can't get classes in your major. You can't. So in other words, if you're a business major and you need accounting 101 and you're at a big state school that has, you know, introductory classes where there's 300 or 400 kids there, and they're only offered by one professor who's on tenure, and he teaches that class every other year on Wednesdays at 11, you may not get that class. But private schools, on the other hand, have much smaller classes, and they have much higher graduation rates. So the reason that's important is because I'm seeding the idea that expensive private colleges are affordable if you rearrange your finances. That's why I put that in there. And of course, it also happens to be true. And then I say, the last one here, what's the average award for freshmen versus all undergrads? Meaning, if there's a wide gap between those two amounts, freshmen versus all undergrads, if you know the average award for freshmen is 23,000, but all undergrads is 12,000, that's a problem. Why is that a problem? And I'll ask that. And then people will be like, oh, because they're baiting and switching, or, you know, they know they got you, you're going to come back, and all that. So that's important there. And then I say, if you want to look all this stuff up, the best place is something called the common data set. So if you're interested in a particular school, let's say it's University of Michigan, I would go into Google and type in University of Michigan common data set. And what you'll get back is all this information and more. It might be 17 or 18 pages of spreadsheets total, but in there, in the financial aid information, you'll find answers to these questions either directly or indirectly. So I recommend the common data set. So again, I'm giving them all the information, but it's a pain in the ass to look all this stuff up in the common data set. So again, I'm telling them how to do it themselves if they want. I'm giving them the what's the right word? I'm giving them the ability to do this, but it's going to be so much easier if they hire someone to do it. I'm not saying that, but that's the message again. Now, here's some strange facts about financial aid. Most aid goes to the top quartile of income earners, meaning families who make 6-figure incomes. And I'm not saying this to be political or anything, but advocates for low-income families have really been outraged by this, because they feel like the money should go to, you know, people who need it the most. But that's just not how it works. I'm just giving you the facts. So again, you're going after upper middle class families, so you want to reassure them of this fact, which is true, and you want to be, you want to constantly tell them that even if you think you can't qualify, it's worth having a conversation about it, because that's really what you want. You want the conversation. The average discount by a private college is 46.3%. I think this is as of, I want to say 2014. And you can always look this up. It's the National Association of Collegiate Business Officers. It increases every year. So depending on when you're watching this, that number may have increased. But that's the facts. 40. It's almost half off average from private colleges. And then of course that satisfies the advertising bullet point, which says how any family can get 45% off the cost of college, or something like that. That's very important because people are very skeptical. Third bullet point here is 25 to 75%. What that means is that at any given college, roughly 25% pay full price. They are subsidizing the other 75%. So if I were a little cheesy and I were to say something like, "Hey, what group would you rather be in?" I think that's a self-evident answer. It's a rhetorical question. Of course, you don't want to be in the full pay sucker pile. You want to be in the subsidized pile, and I'll show you how to do that. And there's actually more merit-based funding out there than need-based funding. This surprises a lot of people, and it wasn't always like this. In the 90s, it was different. There was more. This chart on the left side is public schools, on the right is private schools. This chart shows the growth from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s of what happened. There used to be more need-based than merit. Then it switched sometime around 2007, 2008. And this is from the Department of Education. And this is largely because a lot of private schools are trying to bribe students that they want to come, and they're offering scholarships. So let's talk about need-based. Most of this presentation is going to be on need-based. There's two forms or methodologies that embodied by the forms to understand. There's the FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That's also known as a federal methodology of figuring out how much you can qualify for. All colleges in the country, there's more than 4,000, require the FAFSA. And I know that 4,000 might seem a little high to you, particularly because kids around here tend to apply to the same 25 schools, whether or not, depending, they make their list depending on, what football teams are playing on Saturday, or basketball teams, or what schools are on the rear window stickers of rear windows of cars driving around your neighborhood. But even if your guidance counselors recommend the same 25 schools to everybody, understand there's life beyond the rear window sticker colleges. FAFSA has about 108 questions. It's free, and the website to fill it out yourself is fafsa.ed.gov. And it is relatively straightforward in appearance. But again, remember that chart I showed you, it's deceptively straightforward. So I'm going to talk to you about the ways that people mess it up. About 260 colleges, or 270, I'm not sure, take another form in addition to, not in lieu of, but in addition to the FAFSA. It's called the Css Profile, and it's twice as long and about 10 times as hard, more than 200 questions. The College Board, anyone here know who the College Board is? So people will, raise their hands. Yeah, they do the SAT. I'm like, yeah. College Board is in a bunch of other businesses. Anyone know what other business they're in? And sometimes people guess, sometimes they don't. I'll tell them that they are in one business. Once I explain it, they'll understand intuitively that they knew all along. So then I'll say, anyone here get brochures or emails or even phone calls from a ton of schools, like every week, even schools they never heard of, and then everyone raises their hand. Then I'll say something like, okay, how about if you don't get those, raise your hand. And then maybe one or two people raise their hand, and it turns out their kids are like 3. And you don't really want to necessarily talk to them because they don't feel like they have the urgency or the gun to their heads. But anyway, I'll say, yeah, well, where do you think they get that data? And I say, this College Board sells it to them. So the College Board is in the data business and a bunch of other businesses too, including financial aid. They make the CSS profile. Now, I make that point, by the way, not just for fun. It's calculated because I want to show them that this is big business, and everywhere they turn, people have their own agenda. And I want to position myself, and you should position yourself as the one person who is independent and has only the client's best interests at heart. So that's why I say that. All right. Mistake number 2 is naivete about the truth. College is a business. Here is some stats from a book that came out in 2010 that looked at the tuition-only numbers. Do you see any pattern, any similarities? Yeah, that's why, of course, they all know what each other charges. It's not just an accident. They're within a few dollars of each other. There's no rhyme or reason to why Dartmouth, which is in rural New Hampshire, should cost roughly $8 less. I'm sorry. What is it? Let's see. Let's look at Dartmouth compared to NYU. So it's about $112 difference, even though the cost of living around West 4th Street is a lot different than rural New Hampshire. Here's something else. You recognize this? It's not a resort. It's a college. It's some college in Texas, actually. They have all these amenities. If you've toured a college recently, anyone here toured a college recently? Where do the kids work out? Is it some slummy, low frills, dirty little gym? No, it's the poshest, most luxurious facility that would rival any $200 a month, club in a downtown affluent area. And they have costs just like any business. They pay salaries. They have presidents who make, 7-figure or certainly deep 6-figure salaries. You've got professors who are paid full-time to teach part-time. You've got high-profile football and basketball coaches. But it's not just professors and those guys. There's all of these titles of things that I don't even know what half of them are. What is a dietetic internship director? I mean, I can figure that one out. Credential specialist, sustainability director. These are all on payroll at colleges. That's a big clue why college is so expensive. A lot of times people ask me, wow, such and such is such a hard school to get into. It was a joke back when I was applying. Like University of Miami, that basically to get in then, you needed really 3 things: rich parents, a C average, and a cocaine habit, and then you were in. Actually, usually I say that line like, now you need to be top 10% in your class and so on and so forth. But back when we were all applying to school in the 70s and 80s, you needed C average, rich parents, cocaine habit. Now, you may not be comfortable saying stuff like that, but it's okay. I think it's important to contrast, the admissions rates. And Northeastern University is a school I always pick on because they sent out 200,000 pieces of direct mail to get 47,000 applications and admit, I think it's like 6,000 or 7,000 kids. I can't remember exactly how many they admit, but they went from being just a regular local school, like all these schools. And then what they did was they followed a tried and true recipe. They jacked their prices up. They started doing a lot of marketing to get more applications, and they became more selective because they got more applications and they could reject more people. That helped their rankings. It's a vicious circle. So again, that's important because you're now selling against the colleges. You're selling, you're contrasting that these guys are in business for themselves and you are there to be their champion. Mistake number 3 is missing priority deadlines. And what I mean by that is not the application deadlines, but the financial aid deadlines. It's very easy to overlook the priority deadlines because kids and parents focus so much on getting the applications in for admission. But you have to look at the priority deadlines for colleges. And what I mean by that is every college lists its priority deadline somewhere on its website. It may take a little while to click through and figure that out, but some priority deadlines are as early as October 15th. Some are November. Most of them are February 1, February 15th, and March 1st, March sometimes later. But each college has a different deadline, so you need to do your homework and make sure you don't mess up, because a lot of times if you miss a prior deadline, you're out of luck, because if you get your application in before the prior deadline, you're fine. If you below it, a lot of that money is given out already. So they're very easy to miss, very easy to blow off. Again, I'm scaring them a little bit. I'm telling them they're already overwhelmed. I'm making this more overwhelming. I'm agitating. If you were to look at the FAFSA, you can see on the FAFSA that in the highlighted area, it says we must receive your application no later than June 30th, 2016. Well, I just told you that a lot of prior deadlines are earlier. October 15th, the earliest, but mostly February 1st, February 15th. Don't look at the FAFSA. You can't trust the FAFSA. And then the second, where I have the arrow here, for state or college aid, the deadline may be as early as January 15th. No, it could be even earlier than that. So the FAFSA can be misleading too. I wouldn't blame you. Here's a screenshot of Syracuse University. Their profile is due December 1st. So, again, maybe it's due as early as January 15th. No, December 1st. And there's some other deadlines. All right, making mistake number 4 I'm sorry. Then I like to stop also and say things like, "Are you guys finding this helpful?" You want to ask them questions like that too. Is this good information? And they'll all be like, "Oh yeah. Okay, good." If I'm doing an online thing, I'll ask, say in chat, if this is helpful to you, just write yes in chat. Just let me know, just so I can be, I can be confident that I'm giving you the good information. All right, mistake number 4 is making the forms inconsistent with each other. And if you're doing a FAFSA and a profile months apart from each other, that is a potential issue, because what could happen is the financial aid office could verify you. And that is the equivalent of an IRS audit. You don't want your applications to get additional scrutiny. Why? Well, the more scrutiny you have, the less chances you have of getting a nice award. If they over scrutinize your application, they're not going to give you more money. So you want to avoid making that mistake too. It's a very easy mistake to make, especially if you're mixing up student stuff, your stuff, whatever, which is mistake number 5. And it's very easy to go, because you're going back and forth on the FAFSA when you're filling it out yourself. It's very easy to confuse, who has what, because it'll ask you, how much do you have? How much do your parents have? But you may forget that you is actually the child. When you're filling it out, you're supposed to be filling it out as your child. So here are the implications. Here's why you can't do this. And just as a quick review, EFC has many factors. Some of the big ones out of the 70 are your income. That's the most important, but it's not the only one. It's your assets, but not so much how much you have, but whose name it's in. Your age is another big one. Number of children in college, those are big factors. But what I want to talk to you now about is parent versus child stuff. So I'll give this chart. This is just something I put together. And again, the purpose of this is just to show that you're an expert and they have no idea about any of this stuff. So I'll say just like this. All right, so income is the most important thing, but it's not the most aggravating thing. So here's what we're talking about. Your parent income and parent assets are treated differently than child income and child assets. Remember, the name of the game is to have a low EFC. Well, here's how they boost your EFC in the financial aid formulas. Parent income is boosted between 22 to 47%. You're penalized between 22 to 47%. It's a sliding scale. And what that means is that if you make, and this is a gross oversimplification, but if you make an additional $10,000 somewhere, then your EFC will be increased between $2,200 to $4,700. Child income is a flat 50%, so it's a little bit more. Savings is where it gets really aggravating, and not to get political again, but this is a disincentive to save money the right way for your kids. So any advice you may have gotten from a well-intentioned financial person or accountant or someone to put money in your kids' names may have made sense at the time, but it really messes up a lot of families' eligibility, because money in your name penalizes you at 5% and change, whereas in your kid's name penalizes you much more, 400% more. So let's take a quick look at how that plays out. But understand here, it's not how much you've saved, it's where you've saved it. Bad buckets are in the red, good buckets are in the green. So let me just pause here, add a character. This is it. This is the main thing. This is what's going to get people to make appointments with you right here, is they're going to be afraid they have money in the wrong places. And then you can show them where to, if it makes sense, where to put money to improve their eligibility. Again, you will not be able to do this with 100% of your prospective clients. My best guess is 25%, maybe 30%, but it's a great conversation starter. And as long as you start that conversation, you'll identify other things once you sit down with them and you look at their income and their savings and everything else that you want to look at. Okay. So if you have $100,000 saved in your parent and the parent's name, you boost your EFC by $5,600. But that same $100,000 in your child's name, $20,000. That's the difference. That's the bad bucket. So some stuff counts against you much worse than others. Any questions so far? They're gonna be, yeah, what about a trust? Or what about a 529 or whatever? So that's why I have the next slide here. Okay, child savings accounts are traditionally the basic custodial accounts, UTMA, UGMA, and 529s. The first three are always considered child accounts and penalize you much more. The 529 is, under the federal rules, considered a parent asset. So you penalize less, which is good. You still are penalized, which ain't great, but at least it's not 20, 25%. However, and this is what I would say if I were you, in the collective experience of other college planners I know around the country, what I would tell you is that is that we have a deep suspicion that a lot of the colleges that follow the institutional methodology, the ones that require the CSS profile, they still treat the 529 as a child asset, which is the way it was treated before 2009, I think. So if you have a 529, it's not necessarily good or bad. It might be good. It might be bad. It's bad, particularly if you're applying to a bunch of schools that take the CSS profile and you're also going to qualify for need. So I can't answer the question whether it's good, bad, friend or foe or whatever, but I can tell you that I know firsthand that a lot of people shoot themselves in the foot by having money in the wrong places. So then the next issue is, I guess I just skipped ahead of myself. The next issue is, well, what do you do to move money out? Now, I'll tell you a few things, but none of you is my client, so I can't advise you here. Of course, there is a way to talk to me personally, one-on-one. I'll tell you about that when we're through if you're interested. But what I'll tell you is you have to look at not only the benefits of moving money, but also what are the costs. So there could be penalties, there could be tax consequences, you name it. You have to weigh those against what the potential improvement is. And there's a lot of unscrupulous people out there telling you, yeah, just switch it and put in this type of investment and you'll improve your eligibility, so on and so forth. I'm not one of those people. I would not tell you. Everyone's different. It's not right for everyone to pull money out of a 529. Many people should keep it there. So it's neither good nor bad. Okay. Mistake number 6 is including your primary residence or your retirement accounts in the value of your investments. Now, these are exempt assets under the FAFSA, and there's probably no way that anyone can read this, but this is from the FAFSA directions, and it gives a breakdown of what investments include and what investments do not include. And if you read the directions carefully, which most people don't, they'll tell you in the FAFSA, don't include, they'll ask you the question, what's your net worth? What's the net worth of your investments? And then they'll say, don't include your primary residence or your retirement accounts. And that's buried right here in the rules. Now, there's other stuff that also is exempt that I want to tell you about right now. Actually, here's all of them. So we talked about retirement accounts, we talked about the primary residence, but just to be fair and round out the discussion, if you're applying to a CSS profile school, they do ask about your primary residence. Next is whole life insurance with cash value, not term, in other words, and annuities. Those are exempt assets. So what a lot of people do is they will look at shifting money from bad buckets, the red ones, into the green ones. But like I said before, you have to be aware of the consequences. You have to also understand how the products that you're investing in work, how to get your money out, or the fees, all that type of stuff. And I'm here to tell you that won't work for maybe 25 to 30% of you in this room. In any room I do, it only works for a certain amount of people, but not everyone. So that is important to say because you want them to want to speak to you. You don't want to say something like, I can help everyone here. You want to tell, they'll be more attracted to you if you're not that desperate and you say, I can't help everyone. I'd love to try to help you, but I can't promise you that you're going to be in that 25 or 30% that I'm looking for. So anyway, all right. So I think what I'm going to do here, this is a lot. I have to break off here. I'm going to do another video where we go through mistakes 7 through 12 and the close. And yeah, I'll just pick up in another video. So thanks for hanging with me so far. I hope you found this valuable. And I am going to figure out now how to stop this. All right. I am stopping this, and I'll pick up in the next video.